starting to volunteer with the organization. What's what resources for success and healthy bees. We're going to be introducing our new youth program. And then we're going to go through all the steps of making oxalic acid and talking about some other things to be thinking about during the last part of February and through the mid part of March. So our guest speaker, Vic.
Yes. Vic Bachman.
Yes, Vic Bachman. So it was you and your wife and Nate Hall.
Yes, so
Started.
basically me and my wife now.
If you want to stand where the camera is.
If you want to change the camera, I'm gonna change.
So
I'm
I
gonna go all for yours. No, you change the view here so that it's looking at this camera. Now you just change your video, start your video here. Okay.
Bear with us.
We're working on technical difficulties, folks. Once you got.
I don't need to be
your
on
camera,
screen.
then
That's fine. I can leave it
All right,
there.
now you are.
which camera you're looking
I'm
at
up
here.
there now.
Yeah.
Right click on the ellipses.
Okay.
And hit.
So hi, I'm Vic Bachman. I'm with Deseret Hives Supply. We're a beekeeping store in Ogden. It's not too far from here.
You should.
People from South tend to think that we're a million miles away, but we like to think that we're not that far. But we're a full service beekeeping store. We're not selling out of a garage or anything. It's actually a storefront. We have all the beekeeping equipment that you need. We do teach classes and stuff there, but the Wasatch Beekeepers asked me to come here tonight and teach a little bit about honey. So I have a class about honey. Some of you probably know a lot about it already, but hopefully you'll learn something new today. We can get over to this PowerPoint and I will teach that for you.
She's showing it, but we're getting a multiple effect here, so we're fixing it.
Layers over and top of each other.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Does anybody have any questions about Deseret Hive Supply or anything? We did bring some people word stuff and we brought that, so if you can get to us after, we can go over that.
What's your hours?
Right now in the winter, usually between October and March, we are open 3 days a week. Which would be Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So we're open Tuesday and Thursday from 11 to 6. And Saturdays we're open from 9 to 4. And then on 1st of March, we will open up 5 days a week, so Tuesday through Saturday. So, and basically the same hours. Usually we have classes, there are classes on Thursday nights from 6 to 8, and then we do classes on Saturday from 11 to 2 also. Or 11 to 1, but. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, I will get out of the way of the screen here, and we can just. Talk, you want to switch it back over?
These are your slides.
Okay, yes. So,
And then, yeah.
We're gonna. Is this what everyone else is seeing? I assume.
That's.
Okay.
And that will take.
tell me, act.
Go ahead.
Go.
Go ahead. We think we're
Okay.
broadcasting.
So this is all about honey, so, talk a little bit about honey is one of the oldest food in existence. It's known that people collected and ate honey as far back as 7,000 BC. Honey was reported to be found in the Egyptian tombs of Yahya and I have no idea how to say that, but, so they did find honey in the Egyptian pyramids that was still edible. They were able to still eat it, so it's kind of an interesting thing that they found there. It was once reasoned that bees were messengers of the gods, put on earth to harvest the sweetness that was supplied by divine forces. Honey was conveyed to earth by these magical creatures. Greek and Roman gods were often associated with bees and honey. And then honey is often featured in Norse mythology also. So a lot of cultures had a lot to do about honey. But in medieval Europe, newlyweds were given enough honey mead to last them from one full moon to the next. That's where they say the meaning of honeymoon came from. That's kind of interesting right there. But what is honey? Does anybody tell me what honey is?
Processed food.
Okay, processed food. Kind of. We get a lot of things from bee spit, bee throw up, stuff like that. But honey is a blend of many different sugars, aromas, enzymes, minerals, salts, acids, proteins, trace minerals, amino acids, and pigments. Vitamins, fats, lipids, and still more unidentified substances. There's many as 200 and probably more substances known to be found in honey. A lot of them cannot be synthesized by mankind, so they cannot really produce honey without bees, because we cannot figure out a way to make honey. Or man can't figure out how to do that. But to understand honey, we need to know about nectar. So nectar is a sweet liquid that's produced by plants to attract pollinating insects. Nectar is a sugary substance plants produce and make available to insects and other animals. So nectar is basically a bribe. It's a bribe to get these insects to come to the flower to get them to help pollinate those flowers. But most flowers are designed so that an insect, bird, bat, or lizard, ant, any pollinating creature visits and dips into the nectar stores. It contacts the pollen, which then transfers to the next flower that the animal visits and helps pollinate. I probably don't have to teach you guys about the birds and the bees, do I? So, but pictures of, they collects onto them, and then as they transfer around, they will help pollinate the other plants. The interesting part about honeybees, which is neat, is that honeybees don't cross pollinate. So if a honeybee goes to a flower and it takes nectar or pollen from a flower, it will only go to that type of flower the rest of those trips. Or a lot of different animals will transfer and go from flower to flower. But they say once a honeybee does that, it will only go to that type of flower. That's why they're such good pollinators for orchards and different things, because they'll go to that and they won't cross pollinate. So this is actually a bumblebee, which is doing the same thing. You can see how the bees collect the pollen onto their bodies, they pack it down onto their legs, and they take that back to the hive also. But in parts of China, there's not enough bees to pollinate. They had trouble with that, so they actually brought the European honeybee in to help pollinate with that, which caused problems. But they also pollinate by hand, so they're actually having to go from flower to flower in these trees and pollinate by hand. They do that with a lot of their crops over there because they don't have enough bees to pollinate the orchards and stuff that they have over there. So they'll actually take flowers, take the pollen out of them, put them on paintbrushes, or even just another flower and rub it onto the others. But nectar is the raw product of honey. So basically honey is made from nectar, but it contains the aromas, flavors, pigments, and sugars that make up honey. The predominant sugar is nectar, in nectar is sucrose. Okay, sucrose is essentially a common table sugar. That's what we use to sweeten all of our cookies and different things. But it's a 12 carbon molecule or carbon chain sugar that cannot be digested by honeybees. So honeybees cannot digest sucrose, but that's basically what nectar is. So to convert nectar, the sucrose in nectar to a digestible form, honeybees must transform it in a process called ripening. So they do that, they bring it back to the hive, or it's collected from the flower, it's sucked up through the proboscis, it's drawn up into their honey stomach. So the bees have basically two stomachs. They have a honey stomach and then the stomach they use to eat with, but they draw that up through the proboscis into their honey stomach. They go to the hive, they regurgitate that nectar into the hive. The other bees taste it, say, hey, this is good stuff, or hey, this isn't any good, we don't want any more of this. But if they like it, they will actually ask the bee where he got it, or she got it. She will do the waggle dance and tell them where to go to collect more of it. And then they take it and they start to ripen it, but it enters into the crop of the honey stomach. I just talked about that. But nectar is on average is 80% water, 20% sugar. When they bring it back. So the ratio of water to sugar may vary as much as 50-50, but to as little as 95.5, but it's usually mostly water, nectar is. So the honeybees prefer to gather nectar with as much sugar as possible. So if it's a really good nectar, they will ask her to tell them where she found it, and so that they can go collect more of it. But the ratio varies from plant species. So, but good benchmark at 80-20. So they preferred it to be as much sugar as possible, but can vary. The foragers add a bit of saliva to dilute it slightly so they can pass it from, or pass to the honey stomach. But then once the foragers return to the hive, they regurgitate it in there, but eventually it's released to the house bees and even passed from bee to bee in the colony before the ripening process begins. But they add an enzyme to it. After the bees end up with the nectar, they add an introverse enzyme. That enzyme starts to break down. It catalyzes and hydrolyzes the sucrose. So it takes the sucrose and it breaks it down into fructose and glucose, which are two 6-carbon chain molecules that bees can digest. So they make it into a digestible form. But the addition of the enzyme begins the chemical conversion, makes that into that. But other sugars are created in the process, but glucose and fructose are the most abundant. Glucose oxidized, another enzyme is added at this point. This compound reacts with some of the glucose sugar and water to produce gluconic acid and hydrogen peroxide. So that's why honey is antibacterial, because it contains hydrogen peroxide. So it's a good source for wounds and different things. Okay. And after that, then they start dehydrating it. So a drop of this now changed nectar is allowed to form between the house bee's mandibles and her proboscis. This exposes the drop to warm, dry air of the hive, and some of the moisture dehydrates. She eventually places the drop on the side of the cell where it stays for several hours, dehydrating even more. As the drops lose moisture, they move them around and add to other partially dehydrated drops. There they will stay for several days until the moisture content drops below 18%.
Who's doing all the moving around?
The worker bees.
Yeah,
So
I was just wondering, is it nurse bees or is it like a little bit older?
she's a little bit older bees. So the nurse bees will clean the cell and take care of the queen and babies. But yeah, they move it around. They just kind of progress. Have you seen that bee movie? We're talking about 3 days of elementary school and 3 days of junior high. Basically, about every 3 days, they progress into a new job. They basically work themselves to death. But so they combine with other drops until the cell's full. Once it reaches 18% water content, they cap off the honey. They don't want it to dehydrate past 18%, so that's when they cap it off. It's usually between 18 and 20%. But the genetics of the colony will dictate how the wax capping is placed on the cells. There's a couple of different ways that they do that. Some will lay the wax cap directly on the surface of the honey, like this, and so it looks like it's wet. You kind of see through it. They call that wet cappings.
Does it still retain the moisture the same?
Yes.
Wet cap versus?
Either way is the same. It's just some of them will do it this way where they look dry, and because there's an air pocket between the honey and the capping, so it looks like a dry capping. Now we're seeing where we get both in a hive. We'll do both, and the reason for that is because bees have crossbred with each other. And some of the sperm that the queen used was maybe from a Carnolian drone, and some of it would be from, she made it with more than one type of bee, and so some of them are from Italians, and so they do it differently. But in the hive, the workers could be either or, and so that you will get both types in there. And it's getting more and more prevalent now with its mixed, because they're crossbreeding so much for varroa mite purposes, hygienic bees, so that they're kind of getting a lot of just mixed up with their cappings. The only difference is, the location of the capping. It doesn't affect the finished product at all. So once the honey cells have all been capped off, the honey's ready for extraction. That's what we want to see, is a nice full frame when you extract. When you extract honey, they say not to extract less than, you want mostly 80% capped. You can do a little bit, maybe 20% of it uncapped, but you don't want to get too much uncapped honey, because if it's not dehydrated enough, it can cause your honey to ferment later on inside the jars. So some people might like that, but
What's its flavor?
you just don't want to go get a jar of honey out of your fridge storage and have it, alcoholic or, not tasting good, because it won't be me for sure, but it'll be on its way to get there.
You wouldn't know until after you tried it.
Yeah, so, well, the jar will be swelled up, the caps fall off,
Yeah.
so it should cause problems there. But honey, so there's, that's basically how honey's made, and there's lots of different forms of honey that we can get. We all know you can do combed honey, creamed honey. And I'll talk about different forms here and how to make different flavors of honey. So we can go into that, but now that we understand honey, we can look at the different forms of it. So there are many different kinds. Each batch of honey has its own flavor, its own color. Yes, you have a question?
I was just wondering, how you sometimes leave your, like the free mounts that we used to. Which stomach are they putting that into, like, is it going back into the hive, or are they just eating it?
Yeah, so if they're going out and getting it from a frame that you leave out to clean up, they're actually taking that back to the hive and they will store it again.
So then their honey's
Yeah.
continuing.
So it's just like going to nectar source. They're getting that and bringing it back. So if you harvest your honey and you accidentally forget to cover it up in your garage and you come home and they're covering it, they're taking that back to their hive. I actually read a thing one time that there was some place it was back in the medieval times, but the kings were demanding, the part of their honey. And so they would take it and give it to the king, and they would put it, but one of the guys worked in the storehouse there. And so at night he would open the windows, and then the next day the bees would come and steal the honey back. But the king couldn't say, hey, you didn't pay me your tax, because they did, but they were getting their honey back the next day anyway. So kind of interesting. I don't know how true it was, but
Hey Vic, when we're feeding them sugar water
uh-huh.
or just candy boards, how are they processing that?
So they're having to basically break it down before they can use it as a sugar syrup. So it doesn't take them long to get it to where they can start using it, but they say, like a lot of people ask me, well, is it better to feed them, a hive syrup that's a high fructose corn syrup? And the studies I've read says that yes, it is, because it's already in a form that they can use. Where the sugar syrups, they have to do more work to get it to that point where they can use it to draw out. But people that have done that to get them to draw wax, they're doing it pretty quickly because they're using it. They're drawing that wax out. They say it takes about 9 pounds of honey to produce 1 pound of wax. So the bees have to eat 9 pounds of it to produce 1 pound of wax in their hives. So they can go through it pretty quick. That's like your first year, you have to feed them a lot to get those empty frames filled up. And then the next year, they're not having to build the frame, they just fill the comb full of honey, so you don't have to feed them as much your second.
If you don't steal them.
What's that?
If you don't steal them.
Yeah. Well, and everybody kind of steals them. But it's interesting how if you have 2 hives right next to each other, if you harvest them separately, they will be different colors, they will taste totally different. Most of the time we end up mixing them together because we're doing frames, but I've actually done this in my aviary. I take one and harvest it, and the next one do it again, and a little 2-frame extractor, and the honey is totally different flavor. And you can tell this is batch of bees found mint plant, because you get a mint flavor. Or this one over here was, garlic flavored or honey. We get in Ogden, out in Plain City, they grow a lot of onions. And we have people coming in harvesting honey in our kitchen that we have, and it smells like onions, because it's really a strong onion flavor even, but it tends to go away really quickly. So after they harvest it, a day or so later, it doesn't taste like onions, but it's amazing how strong it is on me. Like, I know where you live. So it's pretty crazy how they do that, but the bees find lots of different things to collect. And we have to label our honey as wildflower honey because we don't have monocrops here where they're just going to one kind of honey. I'll talk about that here in a little bit, but different techniques, they're produce different forms of honey, but honey is presented in many different forms to the consumer. The first one is comb honey. Comb honey is basically where you're making it on without foundation in your frames. You can make it in containers. There's like Ross rounds or hog halves, which is basically a container that you put in the hive. They draw the comb right inside that container. Once it's capped off, you just take it out, put a lid on it, and you sell it. We also have them where we have small little frames that we can put in, where you pull the frame out, cut it out with a cutter, and make, cut comb honey that we put in containers like this.
You sell that by the pound?
Yeah, sell it by the pound. We usually sell it by the pound. We actually get more out of it than honey. And people are willing to pay more for it. Some people will actually sell the frames that we have, the wood frames. I like to reuse them, so I don't have to buy new ones. And most people, once they're done, they're just gonna throw it away anyway. But we have one guy who sells it for about $25 for the frame and everything. But he's like, well, I'll just buy new frames.
Make it like pop bottles where you can get a refund if you bring it back.
Do that. Comes in many shapes, sizes, depending on what shape you cut it into. Some people just use medium frames that they don't put a foundation in, let the bees draw that out, cut it out of that. I've seen them do it with deep frames. Top bar hives, they just, cut the cone right off the top bar. Lots of different ways, but it's very popular. We have people asking us all the time for comb honey. We usually can only have it during harvest season, which is in the fall, and we sell out so quickly that we don't, have it all year round, because we sell so much of it, but it does really good. And then also it's gonna crystallize sooner or later, and it's not as good to eat once it's crystallized. I mean, it tastes the same, but it's kind of gritty. So frost rounds, I talked about with make it right into a container. Bottled and bulk honey. So bottled honey comes in all shapes and sizes. We all know that honey can only be sold in bears, right?
Right.
So, with that, bears and straws.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can put honey in any container that you want. The state of Utah says if you're going to sell it, you need to use brand new bottles. Say, don't save your old, peanut butter jars and peanut or different things. They tried to go to the farmer's market and sell it in that. The health department doesn't like that. And so they want you to have in a brand new bottle, whether it be a mason jar or, any type of bottle, 5-gallon buckets. And then you need to have a label on it, and there's different labeling rules for that. But a lot of people want a 5-gallon bucket of honey in their food storage, which is great to have in your food storage. I prefer to put it in smaller bottles. It's going to crystallize in that 5-gallon bucket. It's really hard to get back into a liquid in a 5-gallon bucket, and it's a lot easier if it's just in a small jar. So we do have a harvest kitchen, we call it, at the bee store at Deseret Hive Supply, which is a full service harvesting kitchen. We have a 32 frame extractor. You can come rent it from us, bring your honey down. Don't bring your bees, just bring your honey. And it has a 32 frame extractor, hot knives, filters, everything's right in there. You can just do it right in there. This is Nate and Charity Davis. They had 40 hives. She was harvesting them in a 2-frame hand extractor. Took her 3 months, almost every single day. She found out about our kitchen. They came and rented it. In 2 days, they had harvested 900 pounds of honey out of those 40 hives. And it saved her whole winter. She didn't have to spend harvesting them. So. But yeah, there's any type of bottle you can put honey in. So lots of different things here, kind of picture of our harvesting kitchen there, different bottles. This honey here, this bottle here was interesting. There's 2 separate harvests. There was a light harvest and a dark harvest. When I put it in the bottle, the dark was on the bottom. It's about 2 days and it flipped over, and the top moved, the dark honey moved to the top and the light went to the bottom. I don't know why it just didn't mix it together, but it was interesting how that happened.
Does metal interfere with honey at all? Do they interact?
It will flavor it a little bit, so sometimes, especially if you have it a long time. I've had honey that people used to store them in like a 5-gallon metal drum. I had somebody bring me one of those one time and I tasted it and it tasted like metal. But it'd been in there for probably 40 years.
My dad
So-
has a can of honey that's probably 50 years old.
Yeah. So it'll probably have kind of a metal flavor to it. Cause it does. Used to.
Yeah.
It just. Yeah. Any questions on comb honey at all or liquid honey?
Same kind of question, but about plastic, I heard that it can leach, the honey being acidic can kind of leach.
Yeah, so it can leak stuff out of plastics too. That's why you want to use the PAF plastics, which are food grade, so they don't leach anything that's gonna be toxic into you. Most honey containers are gonna be that way, but people buy other containers that might not be, so. You'll wanna make sure that you be careful. Yeah, you don't want stuff in your honey that the bees didn't put there, so. Artisan honey. Artisan honey is kind of an interesting thing, but it's honey produced when the beekeeper can harvest a certain flavor. So we all heard about orange honey, the clover honeys, and how they do that is they have a certain amount of acres that's all there is. So it's a monocrop. There's nothing else there. When you go to the orange groves, there's thousands, acres of oranges. And so they know that the bees are basically going to those oranges and nothing else because there's nothing else there. There are companies trying to get them to say, hey, let's stop, let's plant some other plants underneath these orange trees so that the bees will have something to live on other than, just the straight oranges. It's a really big problem up with the almonds because almonds don't produce a nectar, they only produce pollen. And so the bees pollinate them, but they don't produce any nectar. And so there's thousands of acres of just pollen or almond trees. And so the bees don't have anything else to live on. Conan, which is one of the big suppliers up there, they supply a lot of packages to beekeepers all around, but they're one of the world's largest beekeeping companies, but they don't produce any honey. It's all pollen. And so they have to feed their bees the entire time that they have them on their crops they're pollinating. So it's kind of crazy, but so, there's lots of different artisan honeys out there, Manuka, Tupelo, or because they're on certain crops and they know that they're bringing that in, and so that they can label it as that. We have a hard time doing that here because we don't have big areas like that. Maybe we could get an alfalfa honey in some areas, but I don't know of any other big monocrops that we have. A lot of them, like, clovers are usually up in the Dakotas. Manuka, I can't remember, it's out of New Zealand, yeah. Oranges, they do produce, oranges, Florida and California. They had trouble with oranges, they brought in the cuties that everybody loves to eat. Those are actually a chemically pollinated orange. The honeybees, if a honeybee pollinates a cutie, it produces seeds. And so they don't want that. So they ran all the beekeepers out of that area where they started producing cuties because they don't want seeds in them. And so there was a big lawsuit and they ran them all off, trying to get rid of them. Because they were there pollinating oranges and then people started switching to cuties. They want them, so. But true artisan honey is more often than not impossible, because it's just hard to get that much stuff, whether enough of a floral source and, just plain luck, get your bees to go to the right area. So, and you need to realize, hey, are my bees going to this area? Are they collecting this stuff? So usually you want to be surrounded with nothing else. Any questions on that? Okay. Infusing honey, making a flavored honey without having a monocrop is fun to do. We do this at our store. We sell lots of different flavors. One of our most popular is chili pepper. It's really interesting. I did bring some samples, some straws that we make with chili pepper. But infusing is really easy to do. It's just what you're going to do is take your honey, and whatever you want to put in it. So if you want to do raspberries or peaches, you would take raspberries, crush them up, put them into a honey. We usually do about 2 gallons at a time. We'll put it in there, mix it all up, let it sit for 2 days, 24 hours to 2 days, and then you then filter out the parts out of it, and you have a flavored honey. Cinnamon's the easy one to do. You just use powdered cinnamon in that case, because and you just mix it in. But the others, the honey is a super saturated sugar solution, so it's more sugar than it is water. It wants water, so whatever you put in it, it draws the moisture out of that and then flavors the honey.
Eh.
So
So you're putting just a flavored water?
no, the
You're
fruit
putting the
itself.
fruit,
Mhm.
the fruit
The fruit
juice
itself.
essentially.
Yeah, so we kind of crush them up so that you break them. Or, you know, if like ginger, you make slices, chili pepper, you cut into section. But you put that in, you gotta be careful, you don't wanna put too much, because you put too much water in, then you're gonna have a problem with it fermenting. So you kind of learn how much you can put in, depending on how dry your honey is to start with. And how much moisture is in the fruit, like, raspberries has a lot of moisture. Where, you know, ginger doesn't have as much, so you have to use more ginger to get that flavor than you do with raspberries. Some of it, like the raspberries, it draws out the coloring too, so you'll have red or, you know, kind of a purple color if you're using dark raspberries. They do blueberries, we've done.
And then you're putting that in your internal feeder in order for.
No, you're putting it in the honey itself, so you're not feeding the bees.
Oh, I thought you said like the bottom one
No,
there.
this one was a candy cane, which I can talk about here in a second, but yeah, you're doing this with just honey. So, they
Okay.
draw it in and the honey absorbs the moisture, makes it flavored honey. You then filter out whatever.
That was
parts
the
are in there.
confusion, sorry.
Okay, so
So,
yeah,
Vic, does that give it an expiration date now, or?
not really. It's still, as long as you don't go above 20% water content, it
Okay.
stays really good. But if you get it above 20, then you start to have that fermenting problems. And so you usually want to be able to test it, you know, you take a, what's it, hydrometer, a what?
A refractometer.
Refractometer. I was gonna call it the hydrometer, that's for making mead, which you might want to do. Refractometer, yeah, you put it in there and just keep it below that 20% water content. And so, if it is too high, just mix more honey with it and it'll, you know, bring it down. So,
So just so that I'm clear, so you have your honey that you've already put through your sieve and like
yeah,
whatever, and then.
it's all ready to bottle. Yeah.
Okay, and then maybe you run it through the sieve again to get rid of the.
Yeah, so then you
Raspberry,
pour it through the sieve, so you're getting like the raspberry
Okay,
parts out. And a lot of
okay.
times they're dried up. And a
Oh.
lot of times I'll take those and I'll use them in creamed honey, mix it in with the creamed honey to make a flavored creamed honey, just with fruit parts in it.
Okay.
Tree, what is it?
Creamed honey,
Oh, tree.
cream. So we'll talk about creamed honey in a minute. But you remember a few years ago here in Salt Lake, they had the red honey scare?
Yeah.
Okay, what happened there, I don't know if some of you might know, but they had a commercial beekeeper that was feeding his bees in open feeders out in his hives. And he was using candy canes that he got from a candy cane store down in Salt Lake, or a candy factory, that they were broken and they couldn't use them. So he would get them for cheap. He would grind them up, dissolve them in water, and make a sugar syrup for his bees, because he was a pollinator. He just wanted to have that sugar syrup. He didn't care if his honey was red. But other beekeepers, bees found it, take it home, and then somebody went in their hive and their honey was red inside the comb. And they freaked out and they called, the EPA got involved, and it was kind of a big crazy thing. But they came out and said, okay, it's not honey from a floral source, but it is honey. And, you know, we don't recommend you sell it as honey, but you know, it's still honey, the bees produced it from sugar. And so then they said, well, it's got red dye in it. And they said, well, no, red dye doesn't have lead in it like they used to. It's safe to eat. There's no problems with it. And then basically it started selling for higher than regular honey because the meat people found out about it. And it was candy cane flavored. And so they were making a candy cane flavored meat. So it kind of went crazy, but people were doing it. I had a friend that he said, well, I don't want red honey because I'm a BYU fan, so he fed his bees blue sugar syrup, so he said blue, so,
Yeah, if somebody in the neighborhood has a hummingbird feeder
yeah,
with colored syrup,
yeah.
bees are bringing it back.
Yeah, so the bees, they had a problem in France with the same thing happening, but the honey was not orange, it was green. And they were trying to figure out, they finally traced it back to the M&M plant over there. The bees were actually stealing the waste stuff out of the garbage can, taking it back to their hive. So it's kind of, but, so if you want, you can infuse it right in the frame if you want to. But you just basically have to feed your bees a colored sugar syrup, so.
Now, Nick was talking about last month that somebody near Lagoon, that their honey had a Coke taste to it, because they're just eating all the spilled Coca-Cola
Or
around.
probably the garbage
From the-
cans.
Yeah. So he's gonna try feeding his Mountain Dew this year and see how it goes.
Never know.
Yeah.
Bees usually don't go to those things. And they say the bees prefer floral sources.
Yeah.
But they will go to other things like, hummingbird feeders, soda pop can, if they can't find a nectar source somewhere else. And so usually when you see them at your hummingbird feeder, draining your hummingbird feeder every single day, which I've had that problem happen, it's because there's a dearth right then. There's not a lot of nectar. It's usually you're in the hot summertime, the sun, it's really hot outside. There hasn't been rain for a long period of time. Flowers will bloom, but they don't produce nectar because there's no moisture in the soil. So the bees can't get it from the flowers, so they then go to other sources to get it. And so that's when they start draining your hummingbird feeders down.
I see more wasps than bees.
Yeah, wasps do the same thing. But infusing honey, I guess we just talked about this basically, this kind of went here, but crush and grate it, put it in there. 24 to 48 hours. You don't want to leave it too long because a lot of times the fruit will start to mold itself because it floats on the top. And if you leave it too long, you'll start to get some mold on it. So you want to strain it out before that happens. Filter out the bits. Too much moisture, we talked about that. But any questions on that?
You ever use dehydrated fruit?
Yeah, I do for creamed honey, but in regular honey, that doesn't really flavor it much unless you leave it in there.
Fair enough. Thank
And
you.
then you have kind of chunks in it, but
Yeah.
we're just trying to get the flavors in. A lot of honey sticks that you see in the stores are flavored, but they're artificially flavored. Because, and they're colored, whatever color, so kids like them. They have amazing amount of flavors that you can get. In our store, we carry, I think about 32 flavors of honey sticks. That we purchased from a company up in Oregon that makes them. But there's all kinds of flavors that you can get there. I also have a machine now to make honey sticks. That we do some for our customers. If you want honey sticks made, we usually it's actually made by a kid back east, but centrifugal force. You put the straws in, pour the honey in, and then it spins it and fills the honey up, and then you have to melt down with a sealer. So we do have a thing to do that. I brought some chili pepper honey sticks here, so I can give everybody one, but there's some that I made ourselves. There is a company up in Oregon. What is that company called? You remember? Where we buy the honey sticks? But they will actually, you can send them a 5-gallon bucket and they will make 5 gallons of honey sticks for you if you want, of your own honey, but that's a lot of honey sticks, so.
So do y'all sell the flavoring if you brought your honey and wanted to make sticks? Do you have the flavoring that you?
We
can
don't
too?
have artificial flavor, but
You
we could infuse it and put it into sticks,
Okay.
so. If you wanna infuse it, then we can do that for you. But we usually do, about, you're probably gonna want at least a gallon to make honey sticks. It gets really messy. I was gonna bring it tonight and show everybody, but I figured it might take a little bit too long and make a big mess in here, so. Sometimes a straw isn't sealed properly and she throws it out.
So your honey extraction is like a commercial kitchen then?
So it's all approved by the agriculture department. They come and inspect it every year. So if you harvest honey there, we can give you a little paper that says that you did it there. Cause there's some rules, supposedly, it used to be if you went to the farmer's market, you had to be in an approved kitchen. So you either had to have the agriculture department come and inspect your home or do it in a commercial kitchen. If you did it in your home, they would approve you to sell it locally. But you couldn't sell it to anybody that was gonna take it out of the state, which I don't know how they could stop them, but. So our kitchen was approved where you could sell it anywhere you wanted, because it's a commercial kitchen, but yeah, it's kind of. And they have some really weird rules. I don't know, has anybody tried to go to the farmer's market and sell?
Yeah.
So,
It's Davis County. There's nothing, but you go to Weaver County.
Yeah.
Spend all afternoon going over every year the same questions.
so, yeah, it's kind of interesting, but the health department can't control honey because it's an agricultural product. And so it's all through the agriculture department. So you have to get approval from them to harvest, you know, and to sell it, these things. But if you're going to let people taste it at the farmer's market, then you have to go through the health department. So then you have to go get a health department tasting permit, and they actually, I've seen them when we used to do the farmer, they would come and watch. And if you didn't have your permit up, they would come and find you. They would walk through the farmer's market and find the people. I'm like, no.
How do you determine what you sell your honey for? How much per pound?
We look at what it sells for nationally. But you gotta watch, because commercials is a lot cheaper, you know, if you buy it from like a big manufacturer, they're just trying to get rid of it. Or where hobbyists are usually around $12 a pound is what we've seen mostly. I have seen it selling for upwards of $25 to $30 a pound in certain areas. It just depends on how many beekeepers are in your area and how much competition you have. So, but I always go to the farmer's market, or I used to go, you know, I'd set up, then I'd have other people come in and I'd see them looking at the price, and then I'd watch them go over to their booth and lower their price down. And I'm like, you know, don't do that. People are gonna buy it from you, they want it. And it's not worth giving it away. I mean, you're here to sell and make money. So if you're not making money, why do it? You can go broke, stay at home. So,
If they like it, they'll be repeat customers.
yeah, and they'll come back, and you know, it's on how you display it. And you know, we did it a different way where we would had it in big 5-gallon buckets with honey gates on the bottom, and we had empty bottles. And the people came and we would fill it up where they'd pick which flavor they wanted, because we had all the flavors, the infused ones, and then we would fill it up for them. The health department had a fit. They just went crazy over that. They came after and they got after me, and I asked the agriculture department, they said, we don't care, you can do it that way. So, but some places will let you do it that way and others won't. But they'd come to our booth, oh, that's fresh honey, you know, well, it's not any different than the guy over there. You know, but he just put his bottle in the store, you know, or at his house instead of now, but. So, you know, different ways of displaying it, you can get more out of it. And so, people label it organic. Organic's kind of a hard thing to label, because it's not really organic. You might not use pesticides in your yard, but the bees are flying 3 to 5 miles from your home. Somebody in that area is using pesticides. And so they said they've done studies all over the world. They found one place in the Brazilian jungle that had no traces of pesticides. Everywhere else in the world had pesticide traces in the honey. So it's kind of crazy how that works, but. So honey sticks, but any questions on honey sticks? Okay, and then creamed honey. Creamed honey is a great way to make honey. In Europe, they like their honey to be creamed. In America, we like it to be a liquid. So a lot of times you go over to Europe and they're like, well, this honey's liquid, it's not finished yet. They want it to be in the cream before. There's different ways to cream honey. They have some new machines that you pour it in and it comes out the other end creamed. I think it's more whipped than it is creamed, but they claim it as a creamed honey. But if you want to do it at your home, it's fairly easy to do. It's actually a form, so creamed honey is just basically a crystallized honey, but the crystals are very, very fine. If you let honey crystallize naturally, it's usually real grainy, kind of like sand, can be, pretty chunky. But so what you want to do is you want to mix a really fine crystal into it. The best way to do it is go to a place and buy a creamed honey that you like the texture of. So if you find one in the store that you like, take that home and mix that with your honey, and your honey will crystallize to that size. You want to make sure that there's no other crystals in it. So you want to warm your honey up about 110, 120 degrees. You don't want to usually go above 120 because you start killing off some of the enzymes, stupid things. But make sure there's no crystals in your honey. Let it cool down, and then you use 10 parts honey to 1 part seed. Mix that in your 5-gallon bucket. Mix it up good. Let it sit there. It's usually better some cooler temperatures in the 60s. Usually works. If it gets too much hotter than 65, it takes longer to crystallize. But if you're below that, it'll crystallize quicker. Usually some takes a couple days, sometimes it takes a couple weeks, just depending. But you mix that with that, and you just let it sit every day, go in and stir it up a little bit, and it will crystallize. And then you want to, when it starts to get thicker, you're going to get it out of your 5-gallon bucket into your smaller containers, because it will get harder over time. You don't want to have a full 5-gallon bucket full of it. But,
You said no more than 65 degrees in this phase?
yeah, and 65 and below works best. So at our shop, we have a honey creamer that we also will cream honey for people if they want. We usually do 5 gallons at a time. I don't know, do you guys know Ross? Electrician, doesn't have any arms.
Yeah.
He brings his honey and we cream that for him at our store. But he does a lot of it, not based on which cream honey he sells, but so we do that for him. But it actually is electronic, and then you put the honey in it, the seed in it, and it stirs it for us. We set a timer about every, I think, half hour. It turns on for 15 minutes, it stirs it. And keeps it mixed up, and so it crystallizes a lot faster. But if we can't do it in the summertime because it just doesn't crystallize, so we have to do it over the winter when it's cooler in the room, and it'll crystallize for us. So, then you could also flavor it. So usually at that point you can add your dehydrated fruits into it. You don't want to add any liquid fruit because it makes the honey too high of a water content. But dehydrated raspberries, strawberries, that kind of stuff, you can just grind them up, put them in there, and flavor it that way. Crystallization of honey, it does happen. Honey crystallizes, it's a natural phenomenon. Many people think that honey is crystallized, it's no longer good. That's not true. It's still edible. Like I said earlier, they found it in the Egyptian pyramids over 3,000 years old. That was still edible. They just heated it back up and went back into a liquid form. So, most pure raw honey, hasn't been heated above 120 degrees. In the stores, they usually pasteurize the honey because they want it to stay liquid longer. So they heat it up to 180 degrees, they pasteurize it, it will then stay in a liquid form longer. But if it will crystallize over time, but they found in America, people want it to be a liquid form. If it was starting to crystallize in the jar at the store, they wouldn't buy it. And so that's why they start pasteurizing. But it does kill off some of the beneficial microbes and stuff.
When you heat it up that high, does it kill the enzymes in it?
Over 120 it does. So yeah, they say about 120 degrees, then it starts to kill those. So we always keep it below that.
But then if you put it through if it's crystallized and you put it in a microwave, you're gonna have the same effect.
Yeah, you're killing some of it. The problem with it, with when you're microwaving it, the parts of it boil and other parts are still cold. And so, you can use it, and then it also warps your bottles and makes them all kind of weird shape.
Melts your plastic.
Yeah, so you gotta be careful with that. It's best, if you're going to heat it up, don't use your microwave, use a hot water bath, basically. and we'll talk about that here in a second, but, you know, some honey or users prefer it in the States since it's easy to spread and taste is richer, so they prefer crystallized honey. Or, you know, compared to liquid, like in Europe, a lot of people in Europe want creamed honey, that's how they like it over there, they sell more creamed honey than liquid. In the United States, we sell more liquid than we do cream. So why does it crystallize? We learned that earlier honey is a highly concentrated sugar solution, contains more than 70% sugars, 20% water. That means that water contains more sugar than it can naturally hold, and so it wants to be in its solid state. So it's natural for honey to crystallize since oversaturated. The two principal sugars are fructose and glucose. The content of fructose and glucose honey varies from one type to another, so it depends on which floral source they get it from, how it changes when they change it over. So sometimes it's more glucose than it is fructose, other times it's more fructose than glucose. But fructose ranges from 30 to 44%, and glucose from 20 to 40%. The percent of each determines whether it crystallizes rapidly or slowly, but what crystallizes is the glucose. It crystallizes first. So a lot of times you'll see in jars, I don't know if I got a picture, the crystallization there, and some of it's still liquid. And so a lot of times people have a 5-gallon bucket and they're using the honey off, but what they end up with is only kind of partial honey at the end because it's just the glucose and the fructose is floated to the top or vice versa. But so when the glucose crystallizes, it separates from the water and takes the form of tiny crystals. As the process progresses, more glucose is moved and it spreads throughout the honey. The honey changes to a stable saturated form and becomes thick and crystallized. Some honey crystals form uniformly, others will be partially crystallized. And so sometimes you'll get some partially running and sometimes it's as solid as a rock. You've probably seen that.
So what you're after then is to have the crystals be regularly stirred?
Yeah, if you're making cream honey, you want to stir it so it keeps them mixed up, and so it's going to crystallize uniformly.
So your lower left picture there, that's
Yeah, that's more of a cream.
well
done.
yes.
Or this is like when it's hard and you can't even get it out with a spoon, you know, it's like almost impossible.
You said that naturally crystallize. That depends on the temperature outside, the season, the kind.
Well, it depends on the fructose glucose ratio, and then also different honeys will crystallize faster than others. So sometimes, you know, you might notice you harvest your honey, 2 weeks later, it's crystallized in the jar. Others, it's a year later. They say Tupelo honey doesn't crystallize at all. Tupelo, which is a flower down in Florida that they get on a tree, but it depends on it. So they found around here that sunflowers and raspberry bushes, which the bees love, make the honey crystallize quicker. So if you have a lot of raspberries and sunflowers in your area, your honey is going to crystallize quicker than if you don't. So like
if you store your honey in the freezer, 0, it won't crystallize. I have honey in my freezer 2 or 3 years, it's just clear today.
they actually say it still will, but it takes a lot longer because you're slow.
Like that, 3 or 4 years, it's still
Yeah.
no change. If you get a large quantity, keep that in the freezer and then you take it out and put it in a smaller cheese.
Yeah.
And you go the whole year with it.
So you buy a big freezer.
Yeah,
Well, and it's strange because, so I have 3 years of honey. And only my last season's honey has crystallized.
and the older ones have to.
Correct.
It just, the bees found different plants, so.
Well,
There's different amount of particulates because crystals are kind of like snowflakes.
Yeah.
So they need a nucleus, something to attach to. And then there has to be enough energy, so if you have it in the freezer, there's not enough energy for there to be physical change.
Yeah. So,
So there's more
Also,
polymers.
Also, your moisture content could be different.
Yes.
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering, is it, because there, obviously we had such a wet year.
Yeah.
I'm like, what it was different this year because it's already crystallized.
Yeah, so each thing, a lot of things, they call them catalysts, there's something that's caused that to crystallize quicker. And so a lot of different things. I learned the other day, I was, they're talking about dark honey and light honey. Honey is usually darker in drought periods than it is, and it's the tannins that the bees bring back color the honey. And so usually, a lot of people last year's honey was really dark, and that's because it was the year before.
Yeah.
Because it was such a hot, dry year, and then you get a lighter honey. But they also find you get lighter honeys early harvest, and then later they get darker. It's because usually the hotter summer has caused it to bring more tannins and stuff like that.
Flower source can also change the color.
Yeah, so a lot of the different things, like they said, there's over 200 substances that they can't even identify, a lot of them in honey. And it's just stuff that the bees bring back with them. But different types of honey will crystallize, we already talked about that. But the time it would take the honey to crystallize depends mostly on the ratio, I just talked about that, but temperature is a big effect on honey. Crystallization is most rapid around 50 to 59 degrees. At lower temperatures, the crystallization is slowed, like he said, he puts it in his freezer, it slows that process down. Or at higher temperatures, it doesn't crystallize fat because it melts it back down. But the higher it resists crystallization, but over 104, the crystals can't form at all, and so it goes back. So that what they say, if you've got a bottle of crystallized honey, you want to heat it to about 104 degrees. That way you're not killing any enzymes that are in it, but you're making it so the crystals will turn back into a liquid form. So you do that by hot water bath. So pan of water, heat about 104 degrees, put your jar in it. You got to be careful using plastic jars because the heat's gonna melt that plastic and kind of warp your jar. So I always tell it's better to have it in glass, but you put that in there, heat it up, stir it, shake it, whatever, but get all the crystals out of the jar. A lot of people will stick it in the microwave, heat it up so they can use it. Or they'll put it in the water bath. Okay, they use some, but if you leave any crystals in the jar, that's a catalyst, and the other will form back quicker. So if you get all of them out, it's going to stay liquid longer. So hopefully, if you do it right, you won't have to do it as often.
If you expose it to the sun, like put it out on your porch, is that bad?
No,
When it's crystallized?
no, that wouldn't
That's
hurt
okay.
it. And I've done that with 5-gallon buckets of honey.
Okay.
Put them in a garbage bag, black garbage bag, set them out in the sun because it heats it up and helps get it liquid form again.
Or
They make
put it-
heaters.
or put it
that
in
you
your
can get-
car when it's hot.
Yeah,
You can go over the 124.
yeah. In the car, you might get over 120.
When the plastic melts, you have a car clean.
So, yeah, you gotta be real careful. You don't want. I had a friend, he had a bucket of honey tip over in his back of his car. So he took his car out, got all out of his could, parked it over by his beehives and left the doors open. And they cleaned it right up. So,
Say, does it matter the size of what you store it in? Did you say the larger buckets it crystallize faster, or does it matter?
it doesn't really matter. It's gonna crystallize either way, but it's a whole lot easier to heat up a small jar than it is a 5-gallon bucket. They make heaters that you can buy, wrap around, plug them in, and it takes a while to heat that up. Or we talked about the garbage bag, or putting it somewhere hot, bathtub. But, I tell people, it's gonna crystallize. Well, I just scoop it out with it, and I'm like, that's fine, but just put it in smaller jars. That jar's empty, go get a new one, so. But it's up to you how you want to do it. I tell people there's no wrong way to be a beekeeper, there's just different ways. And
It's
we all
real
know
easy
that.
to put those jars in a crock pot and
Yeah.
just melt it that way.
Yeah,
Really
it's
you
just,
control
and you
it.
can go hotter than 120, it's still edible, it's not gonna hurt it. Other than it's killing off some of the beneficial enzymes and microbes that are in the honey. And so people that want raw honey, that basically honey that has not been heated over 120 degrees. So if you're labeling your honey as raw, you wanna make sure that you keep it below that temperature. But other than that, can I answer questions for you? We talk about those things.
I don't know if it's related to crystallization, but, some kind of ton of honey crystallized, I've never seen any kind of separation where there's a very liquidy sort of watery component. But I bought honey from a roadside beekeeper once, and that happened pretty rapidly, where there was some partially crystallized, and there was a layer of like I wondered if diluting honey with water is a common practice, and if that's what might have made it look like that, or separate like that. It was more separated than crystallized.
Yeah. They shouldn't be doing that, but they could. But usually honey will absorb the moisture itself and then just becomes runnier honey.
Yeah.
But so they had the problem with Chinese honey. I don't know if you guys heard about that. They were importing honey from China because America uses more honey than we produce. And so they were bringing it in for China. And then somebody said, well, what is this? And so they tested it and they found out that it was fructose, high fructose corn syrup with a little bit of honey mixed into it. And they were selling it to us from China. So they banned Chinese honey. And so they started buying honey from other places. And then somebody said, well, how is this little island producing all this honey? So they tested it and found out it was Chinese honey that they bought from China and sold it. So it's kind of crazy.
I realize the value of capped honey, but if you're late in the season, like late September, and it's still not capped.
Yeah.
Do you harvest it anyway?
You can, and so they recommend no more than 80% cap or no less than 20%. Or well, I don't know how they put that, but they don't want you to harvest too much uncapped. But I've found that I've tested it with our their tester, and even though it's uncapped, it's refractometer. So even though it's uncapped, it still might be I've seen it as low as 12% water content. Because our summer is so hot here that it's dry. And I think that what happens is it's so hot that the bees don't want to produce wax. It's just so they stop. So what I tell people, pull your frame out. If it's uncapped, hold it sideways and shake it. If it starts dripping out, it's too thin. If it stays in there, you're usually okay.
So I have a question about that. A couple of years ago, I had like almost a whole box that was like 13% water content.
Yeah.
I said it, but it tasted weird, and I wondered if there was like a ripening that still needs to happen, even if the water content is lower, like.
Well, I mean, it does break it. It breaks the sugars down, but it usually, it could have crystallized before that happened. I don't know what would have caused that.
It just tasted like.
And it could have
It
been
just tasted totally different.
the
So now
floral
I'm
source
scared
that it
to
came
do
from.
that Because I'm like, was it not right, or does that not, I didn't know if that's a thing, like if honey has to ripen more. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, usually the bees produce and do it themselves, so they make it that way and they cap it off, or even uncap it.
Floral source.
Yeah, it was probably the floral source it came from. Like I said, we get those onion flavored. I've also had garlic flavored honey. And it's amazing all the different flavors that there are.
My daughter had a honey that tasted like swamp. It was a cover crop, forage,
Forage,
yes,
yeah.
and it was not good.
Every time I go on a trip, I buy honey and get it from different places and there's some really nasty honeys out there.
It was swampy.
But yeah, so, I mean, buckwheat honey, buckwheat is really, it's a weird flavor.
An onion would have been better, so.
So, there's lots of different flavors out there and different things to try, but
Yeah, I know. Give us an idea of what is the use that people.
what's the what?
What do you
Use for honey? It's good for allergies, especially, so, they say a tablespoon of honey a day is good for local allergies. What even works better is pollen. If you can collect the pollen and take the pollen grains, it works for allergies. But people use honey for all kinds of things. You can use it in place of sugar, but you have to reduce the amount because of liquid that you put in. So if you're making cookies with it, instead of granulated sugar, you use honey, but then you would reduce some liquid that you would put in, like the eggs and water.
And that digestive enzyme satisfies my hiatal hernia, so I don't have heartburn in the night.
Yeah, so
garlic honey, what do you do with garlic honey?
with what?
Garlic flavored.
Garlic.
What do they-
Onion flavored honey?
Garlic. flavor, yeah,
Garlic,
we do.
usually the flavors kind of mellow out.
Yeah,
And-
good question.
Leave it open.
Yeah, you usually mellows out after time, so usually like the onion flavored ones, it's strong when they first harvest it. But a couple days later, it just tastes like a,
So you keep putting your tea.
yeah, it's good in your tea.
Like a marinade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like the chili pepper, the honey we make, people use in barbecue sauces and stuff like that.
So you're saying it's strong when you first harvest it and then that dissipates?
Yeah,
So I'm picturing that you jarred it, but it wouldn't dissipate if it's jarred, it's like.
leave the jar open
It's
for a little
open
bit.
and then it dissipates.
Yeah, and I think it even mellows out after they jar it, but it's just kind of a weird thing, cause it's amazing. I walk into that kitchen, I'm like, you're from Plain City, they're like, well, how'd you know that? It's like, cause I can smell onions.
Oh, it's interesting.
With your chili pepper, do you use the fresh chili peppers or like the dried ones crumbled up?
Fresh-
What do you do?
Fresh chili peppers, yeah, you want moisture in them, so, we use the Thai chili peppers. We call it hot honey, it's probably our best seller. I'll even, a lot of times if I sell it at farmer's market, I'll put chili pepper in the jar with it, just.
I
for
was
looks.
wondering, that would be so cute.
Yeah, so, but, I have some samples that we can give out if you want, try that. I have some creamed honey samples. We have other flavors up with little spoons. If you guys want to try some different flavors. We make ginger was a really good seller for people putting their tea. We've done all kinds of different flavors, but, so last year or a couple months ago, we went to the National Beekeeping Show, the American Bee Federation, and we entered their honey contest. Is anybody ever done contests? So it's kind of it's a crazy deal. I call it more of a, can I follow the rules contest than it is a honey contest. But when you have 1,000 entrants and you're trying to dock points, you gotta have things to dock. So it's mostly how well you fill the bottles. You have to give them 4 samples, 1 pound jars. And they measure them, and if one's different than the other, they dock you points, and if you have honey on your lid, they dock you points, and they do clarity. A little bit on flavor, not much, because flavors, depending on who's tasting it. So it's kind of a crazy thing, but we took first place this year and last year at the national show with our honey. We also took second, third place in a couple different categories. But it's fun to do, but there's a lot of different things to get your honey prepared for that. The national shows are a lot stricter than, say, the state fair or something. They actually have certified judges that judge your honey in these shows. They put it in a polariscope, which is a filtered light, and so they can look through it, see if there's any crystals or air bubbles in it, any, foreign objects like hair or bee parts. So you have to filter. It's amazing how clean we have to get it to do those competitions, but it's fun to do. So, but any other questions?
Yeah, so I just have one hive, right?
Okay.
I'm brand new, but if I'm,
It won't be long, you'll have to.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
extracting my honey and I end up with bee parts in my honey. Is that?
That's
ruin my
normal.
honey?
No, you just straighten them out.
And so I'm imagining a bunch of bee guts in my honey that doesn't affect my.
Oh, there's not gonna be bee guts. Well, there could be. I've seen people harvest frames with bees. Yeah, you might get an antenna, a wing piece, because the bees, lose things. But yeah, so usually once you harvest it, you run it through a strainer.
Yeah. I know
So
that. I was
there's
kinda curious about-
different types of strainer, but yeah, I recommend straining it through a double sieve, which has a big strainer and then a
Yeah.
fine strainer into a bucket with a gate on the bottom.
Yeah,
Then you can bucket it or bottle it right out of the bucket.
yeah. I do
But
that.
some people filter, like in competition, we run it through these filters of how micron are they? 50 micron filters. So I mean, because you're trying to get everything out of it. I'm like, is this a honey competition or is it, it's like, to me, it's honey competition is bee. This is bee coming out of my hive, here it is. But that's not the way it is.
So at Griffith, I've never had any incident with your competition, it's all like that stuff and not by the honey taste. There's a contest called the Black Jar Honey Contest. that's purely flavor, so it's unlabeled, and people from all around the world enter it. It's hosted by some organization in the US, Fish somewhere in North America, but anyway, look up that Black Star Honey Contest, and it's purely on flavor, which is subjective, but they talk about how they assemble the panel of judges and stuff.
Yeah, so interesting. So in a regular national company, you can't put any labels on it. The jars have to be, every jar is exactly the same. And so you can't, rig the judges, I guess, tell them mine has the pink lid or whatever. So, yeah, and then, but it's funny how they do things. I was at a place and they were talking, they had somebody come and talk about, they took honey to New York City. And they went into Times Square and they started giving people flavors of it, tasting different honey. And they asked them where they were from. And usually the honey, they wanted people to pick their favorite honey. So they said, well, I like this one. And they said, most of the time, that was the closest honey to their home. What they picked. So they said, we don't know exactly what's caused that. Is it, the flavors they grew up with, but they're picking honeys from their local area. So it was kind of an interesting study that they were doing. So, but I've probably not taken too much time.
Yeah.
So, but we'd love to have you come to the store. We do have some flyers that she hands around. We can give some samples at the end here. And if you want to try some different flavors that we make, we'd love to help you with it. And we are, we have all the bee equipment. If you need anything, we can ship it to you. We can come down and pick it up. We sell bees too. There's lots of people doing that now, but so it's getting crazy with the bees nowadays. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Quick plug for next month. Brianne Dela Cruz, she is an adjunct professor at the University of Utah. She is a master gardener, and she's also the owner of Gather and Grow. So her presentation, I don't have a title just yet, but it's about native plants, where to plant them, and how to sort of design your yard even, in terms of water. And so she's going to be focusing on native plants that are drought tolerant that will help bring in pollinators and birds into your yard.
So as we walk our neighborhoods, we should scatter seed.
Yeah. Johnny Apple.
Throw those bad seeds out.
I wanted to introduce, Tanner's not with us today. He had some business stuff to do, but we've got our new beekeeper who will be sitting on the board to make sure that the information we provide at meetings and workshops take into account new beekeepers in addition to all of us who are a little bit more seasoned.
It's like the only professional looking one.
We desperately need at least 2 more volunteers to help us with organizing everything for the state fair. Robert Stevens used to do the bulk of the work with Rosemary Bennett, and hopefully Rosemary will continue. But we need 2 more people, especially if you have woodworking skills. We need to build some things. We want to make our booth more interactive, more interesting. Because right now, the most interesting thing is the large observation hive. But we want to do things like put microphones in a smaller observation hive so people can hear what's going on inside. We want to have microscopes and have people look at stuff up close. So
Show people how to use a refractometer.
How to say.
Yeah.
So if there's enough of us working on it, it shouldn't be too much of a workload for anyone. So if you're interested, contact us at wasatchbeekeepers@gmail.com. Let's see here. Oh, and then someone contacted me. I think her title is experience manager. So the lodge at Blue Sky. So they're on 3,500 acres. And they have all sorts of activities, and they're looking for a beekeeper to come take over. They have 2 hives. The person who's taking care of it now doesn't want to do it anymore. It's a paid position. They want at least 2 experiences a week. And starting now through August. And they want honey tasting, people to be able to look inside a hive, while you're inspecting. And then any other new programs that the person wants to come up with. It could be bee biology, it could be pollinators in general. So if you are interested, her name is Priscilla Barnett. This is her contact information. And she's eager to fill this position. I don't know how much it pays. So. But they're desperate, so maybe you can set your price. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how you can have the best success possible. One of which is to be a member of the club. And it's interesting, you guys are all rebels because nobody wants to fill out the form. And that means I spend hours and hours collating all this information. So please fill out the form, whether it's for a workshop. We had 21 people order sponges and only 12 filled out the form. And if you have cash and you don't want to do Venmo, we can work with you. We've got PayPal. I don't have the QR code for PayPal up here. But again, you get discounts on your sponges or any other thing that we create, any other workshops we do here, personalized mentoring for free, bring in speakers, and of course, the fall banquet.
Can you tell us if you fill out the form? Because I felt like I did it twice. But then you sent me a message, do it. That was like, maybe I'll do it. So maybe I'm not.
Or it's a problem with the Google Forms.
Yeah.
So I usually spend about 3 hours making those stupid forms because it's not very user friendly. So maybe that's why I'm annoyed. Personalized mentoring, Jen Hine is our mentoring coordinator. So if you'd like to be a mentor or if you want to mentor, she's the person you need to send your contact information to. And we link mentors and mentees based on where they live. So it's easy for everyone, for the mentor and mentee to get together. Yeah.
I was about to say, if you're a new beekeeper and you don't have a mentor, you're gonna wish you had. Because it's from what bees cost. And you lose them because you didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and they're very specialized organisms, so it takes a lot of knowledge to be able to keep them living through the year. Yes, so definitely if you're a new beekeeper, if you've never been able to overwinter any of your hives, you definitely need a mentor. Utah Beekeepers Association, their conference starts tomorrow. I don't think it's too late if you still want to sign up to attend, especially by Zoom. You do have to be a paid member, but it's not very much at all. $30 or $35 if you want to attend in person. And this is a great place to meet other beekeepers and to hear a lot of different points of view. I think this is a great place to learn new information.
It's not too late.
Oh, good.
You can sign up when you arrive as well.
Oh, and you can sign up. Yes, yeah, I've been attending by Zoom since the pandemic, so
How do
excellent.
you sign up? Sorry, how do you sign up?
If you go to this website,
Okay.
and if you want, I will be posting, hopefully, we'll be posting the presentation soon within the next couple of days, but obviously, if you just type in Utah Beekeepers Association into your search engine, it will come up with their website.
Conferences are fun. You meet a lot of people and get a lot of good information.
Yeah.
Might just endure by.
And then here's all the information
You have it.
for registering your hives with UDAP. So it has been, they've got 2 websites up. One they don't take care of anymore and a new one. So I just made bullet points of an email I received from Janae. She's the person who can help you with all of your questions. If you can't do it online, I couldn't get it done online. So I just called her and she did it for me. So she is a great resource.
I did it the other day, I couldn't renew my license. So I just re-registered and they gave me a new number and it went through
Right.
fine.
Because you have to have a new Utah ID number, and so, yeah, it's quite cumbersome, but
Yeah.
supposedly in 2025, they just will have one. All right, and remember, when you do register, you'll get notifications if they're gonna be spraying in your area for mosquito abatement. If there's outbreaks in your area, you know, or foul brood or something like that, you'll also get notifications. So we are, yes,
You know why they're changing numbers? I mean, if it's the number I'm thinking of, I have that like stenciled on the side of my hives.
Yeah.
I was hoping I'd say the same number. I'm not.
you can stay, I have the same number. It's just like your personal username number, your Utah, that.
Yeah, they changed the way to log into the site, and so you have to get a.
So you shouldn't have to do any re-stenciling.
See, that's what I had to do, because it never would allow me to
Oh,
renew.
See, you should have just called Jeanette.
You just
And-
called them.
Yeah, and I hadn't stenciled mine, so it's like, whatever,
Yeah,
new number.
but if you can't get it done, she'll be able to help you. So as an organization, we're sponsoring a new program. It's our youth beekeeper program. We're targeting young people ages 12 to 18. So we're gonna have 2 application pools, 12 to 14, 15 to 18 years old. We are trying to get like the students here. I'm trying to get permission to advertise the program and to make the application available to them. I posted this on Facebook. I'll probably email it to everyone who's on the email list. But if you have young kids, if you have grandkids, if you're in the education system, if you could talk to principals, that's who we need to get the okay from in terms of being able to promote the program in their school to get young people. The only caveat is probably none of your children could do it because you can't have a beekeeper in the immediate family.
So what do they get for doing that?
So they're gonna get a hive, 1 deep, 2 mediums, bottom and top cover, bees with a native queen, all the equipment they're going to need, mentoring by one of us. And then in return, they need to stick with it for the full year. And they're gonna give 2 short presentations. And then we're hoping to get them to like enter their honey into the state fair contest and things like that. And then if they complete everything at the end of the year, they get to keep all the materials and resources.
So do you have an Instagram page?
No, you want to design one?
I'll think about it for you.
Okay.
So you said they get 1 deep box and 2 medium,
We were thinking that it might be heavy for a younger, 12 to 14.
so that's basically. Because I teach in my classes that you're supposed to have 2 deep boxes or 3 mediums
Mhm,
to overwinter here.
mhm.
So are you kind of wanting them to overwinter in what, 1 medium and 1 deep?
Or just 1 deep.
So do you guys have luck
I do,
with the 1 deep?
I do, yeah. But this is our first foray into this, so we are open to suggestions.
But yeah, it's just most of the studies they find that the bees need 80 to 100 pounds of honey to survive our normal winters. Which we don't have normal winters anymore, but.
Right. Which means they actually go through more honey because it's
Yeah,
warmer.
so,
Yeah.
and usually they can't get 100 pounds of honey in a single deep.
Right.
So that's why I tell people they should overwinter them too, and for some they have better luck that way. Unless you have a real weak hive, which can kind of be beneficial too, because bigger hives usually don't have as many varroa mites.
Mhm.
But that's all the.
So Vic, with a deep and 2 supers or 2 mediums,
Yeah,
could you overwinter in that, or you
You
worry about
could.
the air gap?
you could, but it's just, if that's all they have, then if they're taking honey, it might
Right.
be a little low.
So we
Yeah,
we thought about giving them a super, a 3rd medium, and like Nicole was saying, we thought originally do all medium boxes, because we're dealing with 12-year-olds.
Yeah,
then, we don't want a 100-pound box.
yeah, and I tell that too, but see, a medium's still 80 pounds, which is still heavy. for a
Yeah,
motor.
yeah.
So, that's why I usually teach people, well, don't lift the whole thing. Move it, you know.
Yeah.
Move the full frame, have a couple boxes.
Yeah, so, but,
Alright.
you know.
That's a good idea, yeah.
I would be willing to donate stuff to that program too for them.
Oh,
Because we don't have deeps. I've got, in storage, we've got, like 30 medium boxes, but we don't have deeps.
Okay, and I can get some big.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd love to help you with that. So I think that's a great program.
cool, well, thank you.
All mediums will work too.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people do all medium, they'll do, we say 3 mediums for, or, you know,
A little over a deep.
yeah.
Okay,
Or 2
good,
mediums.
good inputs. Yeah.
Alright, thank you. All right, so let's talk about what's happening at the end of February, kind of until this time in March. So starvation is what you need to be worried about. Even if you've got a really strong hive, they can starve really quickly. If you've got a couple of cloudy days, rainy days, brood rearing is certainly going to be picking up more as we get into March, mid-March. So they say, the bees can consume up to 3 pounds of food per day, and they're ramping up brood rearing and they're flying a lot. And so that's one of the reasons why we need to keep watching it. So what we need to do is about a 2-hour time period. You'll be spending, make sure that the entrance is not blocked, that you're thinking about the future. Do you have enough zippers? Do you have enough foundation or frames or gloves or whatever it is that you may have used up the season before? If you assess that you don't have enough food, then you need to start emergency feeding. And once you start feeding, you have to continue feeding until the honey flow or the nectar flow is on. So I see suggestions of 1.5 to 1. 1.5 sugar to 1 part water, or just a 1-to-1 ratio for the syrup. And then some people, their approach to beekeeping is feed them everything they need. Other people are more hands off, but typically you don't want to give them a pollen until there's going to be enough resources to support all the brood rearing, because you need a lot of bees, right, to attend to all the developing larvae. On a calm, meaning not windy, fairly warm spring day, then you can do a quick inspection and you start assessing, how many seams of bees, where in the hive are they located, and record. I'm a big fan of taking notes. If the bees are not in a tight cluster, if it's warm enough, then start poking around, looking. Do you see the queen? Do you see eggs? Do you see a sign of rearing brood? It might give you an idea if you've got multiple hives, which ones are weak. How can you start spreading some frames around if it's warm enough to do that? Of course, you want to make sure that you find your queen for your stronger hive to make sure she's not moved. Keep in mind that with all these cooler temperatures and not enough food resources, your bees are probably going to be a little bit more aggressive. This is a form that Natalie Natalie Thompson, she's the one that I think modified this or developed it, but this is the kind of data sheet that I use. And I thought I'd share with you real quick. So on one side, so it's a double-sided data sheet, and on one side, you have your 10 frames, one side versus the other, and then you have all these shorthands. So F is for foundation, C is for comb, H is for honey, P for pollen. And then you have CB is for capped brood, DB is drone brood, and then queen cell and capped queen cell, supersedure, and then if you see the queen. And so what I do when I'm inspecting the hives is I just, I either use a highlighter or I use a pen and I mark off where materials are. So we've got honey and pollen on the outside frame. And then, oh, okay, now I see my cluster is not in the center, it's over to the side. Which can also give you an indication it must be warmer over there. So if you're gonna start moving things around, you wanna make sure if you're gonna be adding frames of brood, that you add it to the side of the hive. That's the warmer side, that's where the bees prefer to be. And the data sheet has, let's see here. Whoops. So it's got enough space for 3 brood boxes, or you can, just ignore some of the notation and use it for your honey supers if you're trying to see what you've got in your hive. And then when you're all done, the other side of the form allows you to provide all the basic information. What day did you do it? What was the weather like? What kind of hive? How many deeps? How many mediums? What was the entrance looking like? And then this area here is all your summary data. So it's a quick way where the next time you go in to inspect your hive, let's say it's 2 weeks later, and you've got 6 or 7 hives, it's almost impossible to remember who's got what where. And here you can just look and see if you've got problems, if it's strong. Down here, you made notes about, did you feed, did you treat for mites? What kind of problems did you see? Did you requeen? It's a nice way to keep all your data, because data is only really important unless you start having problems. And then you can kind of backtrack and say, oh, I was actually seeing it much earlier, and now I know what to look for. But there are lots of different ways of taking notes. There are a lot of apps that you might be interested in, and you just have to, do a quick internet search and you'll come up with all sorts of stuff if you don't like the pencil and paper method. And then I have, I've been looking at some videos to see what would be helpful for people. Bob Binney is a great resource, and he's got all sorts of videos about spring management, what to look for. If you're going to feed, then you have to start thinking about swarming behaviors. So these 3 videos I thought were a good resource. All right, so assessing food availability. When you're looking, if you've got a really warm day and you see a bunch of uncapped honey and nectar, in general, I've been told, don't even think about counting that, because that can be gone within such a short period of time. You want to look for capped sources for food. On the warmer days, like my bees are out when it's like 47 degrees and warmer, but there's nothing out there for them. So this is going to make them hungry. And then we've got crocuses and daffodils and some tulips popping up, depending upon where you live. But we've been having a lot of cloudy days. So when it's cloudy and it's cooler, you're not going to get that same kind of nectar production. So it takes several warm days and sunny days for there to be concentrated nectar, something that would be mostly, more sugar than water. And then if you're seeing this, so this is a picture of a bunch of dead bees, and it's all the little bee butts sticking out. So this is kind of a typical thing you see when a hive is died because they just starved to death, right? Population got too small and they either froze to death or they starved to death.
So, yeah, usually we see that a lot in people's hives, but they say, well, there's honey 2 inches away from them. And that's kind of on the thing that with the winters. If we get those cold periods where it's 32 degrees or below freezing for 2 weeks, bees can't break that ball up and move over. So they can actually starve to death because it's too cold in the hive for them to move. And so we find that's where tar paper wraps help, or a hive wrap that allows the heat of the sun to warm that hive up. Even though it's cold outside, there's still that warmth to heat them up. And it might be 20 degrees outside, but the hive will be 40 degrees because the sun can absorb through that. Tar paper wrap. I also tell people in the winter, or when you first go into fall, kind of lift the back of your hive up, feel how heavy it is. And then in March, go out there, hey, it's getting really light, they're running out of honey.
Yeah,
So
and then you gotta start
check your
supplementing.
candy bar super and stuff like that.
dangerous is this weekend gonna be? We're supposed to get to 60 degrees Sunday and Monday, and we're supposed to get snow. Is that?
And that's hard on too, because they break the ball, they think, okay, it's getting warmer, and then if they don't ball back up, you know, it's hard on. We find that most bees end up dying in February and March because of the weather and run out of food. You know, everybody gets excited, my bees survived, 2 weeks later, they're dead. You're like, you're out.
That happened to me, they died in April, and it was huge, and I was like, so happy, then they all left.
Yeah. Well, if
You
you
crack the top lid sometimes too, and if they're all clustered on the top frames, the top bars at the top of the hive, they're dark. If they're still down in the frames, they still have some. food working down.
That's where the candy board supers come in handy,
yes,
you know, and if it starts getting warmer, get some liquid feed on them, use a Boardman feeder, put that on the front hive and.
so I've started feeding liquid, Jerry started feeding syrup.
Yeah, we got
Inside the hive.
Yeah, I usually do it on the front line because I don't want to be opening that hive when they run out and it's too cold to open it then.
Mhm.
But even though on the outside of Boardman feeder, if the syrup is too cold, they're not gonna eat it anyway, but he's not opening and let that heat out either. So you gotta be real careful. You don't want it doesn't take much to let that heat off. We've done infrared cameras, the ball's about 95 degrees. An inch away from it is cold. And so you open that up, their heat's gone. And people think, well, they're heating that whole hive. They're not really, they're just heating the cluster. So.
So I have a question. I have 3 hives, and one of my hives, in fact, it's my weakest hive. I have cooked candy boards on all 3 of them, but my weakest hive, they are packing the sugar out. So every day there's like and I live in Camas Valley, so it's really cold. But every day there's like a bunch of sugar that they're packing out, but the other 2 are not doing that.
Something to do there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Get him some with
Yeah.
the bagging.
Every hive's got its own personality.
And it's like, why are you guys cutting that out? It's February, and there's a lot more winter left.
Yeah, well, I don't know, if you insulate your hives,
I do.
then maybe liquid would work on top. You know, like a Ziploc bag of a 1-to-1 or 1.5 to 1.
Yeah, in fact, today, so I took the insulation off because I knew I was gonna open the opening to kind of clean out. And when I took the insulation off and the hive was like so warm. It was crazy, just. How, and I also have an infrared camera, so those are just kind of fun to.
Yes.
See, ooh, you guys are right here.
So do you have temperature suggestions for how warm it needs to be to keep it? Like a daytime temperature?
I usually tell people 50 above. Because if you don't want to open the hive unless it's below 50 for sure.
Yeah.
We're like 30s.
So, yeah, it's hard.
So to feed them even a bag,
Yeah,
sure, it would scare me.
I would do a Boardman feeder on warmer days because, you know, the stuff's gonna keep it warm and they don't have to open the hive to get to it.
Yeah.
But it's just a mason jar out front, but. Every year I get people, I open the hive and my bees will move around, but the next day they're dead. Because they're killed.
Yeah, you wanna do it on one day, and I have both a candy board on there, and then, you know, there's space where they've eaten away the sugar, and that's where I put the bag.
And if you do have a candy board on top, you could go open it up because you're not really exposing the bees, because that candy board should protect.
Yeah,
them.
so I'm just
You can
looking
put it
up
up
the-
there too.
Thanks.
The opening of the network.
And so this is another thing to look for when you're looking at your comb, if you're trying to figure out what's going on. If you see a lot of captive brood that are decapped and the larvae kind of look like little dried out husks, it's because they've been cannibalized. They're starving and they're trying to save the colony, you know, so they're eating their young.
That happens a lot this time of year because the queen starts laying, but then it gets cold again, and so. They start cannibalizing because of the cold weather.
Well, they already died because they got cold.
Yeah, they can't produce. there's no way for them to save them for the season.
Yeah, so you gotta figure out how you're going to quickly assess how well fed your bees are, so that when we do get those cold snaps, we do get the, couple days of snow and then nothing but overcast skies, how are you gonna keep your bees fed through that?
Yeah, be real careful when doing the hive inspection where you're pulling frames out to study
yeah.
here.
Yeah,
Never do
nobody
that.
pulling
Yeah, don't do it.
anything
I
until
said, oh,
you're.
they could be their diet. Yeah, they are dying now.
Yeah, so here are two examples where you've got, a jar out on top or a bucket. It's probably too cold for that yet. Boardman feeder would fit in through the entrance. You gotta watch out for robbing, attracting other bees that, if you've got multiple apiaries in your neighborhood.
Yeah, you don't want to pay to feed your neighbors.
And then here are some other resources to learn more about how to care for the bees and it's sort of the sensitive time of the year. Frederick Dunn is also a wonderful resource. He does this thing where he has, and there's like 243 of them, where he just takes questions from beekeepers and then he goes through point by point answering all the questions. And he's done this 240 plus times. So there's a lot of really good resources out there. The other thing to bring up is water. Water is so important for our bees in terms of maintaining humidity and temperature, basic, GI tract type of health. And now is the time to start training your bees to find the water on your property. And so you want to have one, and if you move that bucket of water, like 3 inches to one side, they won't find it. They keep going, just to the side of it. So figure out where you're going to put your water, get it all set up. This is a bucket that I use. It's a food grade 5-gallon bucket. The lid, I just drilled some holes in it, used a little fish pump, and I have an outdoor outlet, so it runs all year long. And the bees are coming to get water all year long when it's warm enough for them to fly.
Is that rocks on the top of it?
Hmm?
On your bucket, is that rocks?
Yes, so it's a little bit, it's not pea gravel, it's like mid-size. Otherwise, the smaller the rocks, it causes too much pooling because it covers up the drainage holes. And bees, they don't like to get their feet wet. So I use a larger size rocks and keep them close enough so they don't drown. I've used, standing water systems like this is like a dog dish. But in the summer, the water gets really hot. And then I noticed more problems with algae and other things. So I prefer a moving water approach. Another really easy thing to do, if you've got sprinklers and you're shutting your sprinkler system down, you can convert one of those sprinkler heads to a soaker. And then when you're watering other parts of your garden, it will fill up your little bee bath. It could be a bird bath, something elevated. It could be like the system here that's on the ground. But the important thing is to give them water and give them water on your property, because that solves two problems. Your neighbors having an issue with you because your bees keep going over to their place, and bee life cycle or bee lifespan in part is defined by the number of flight hours or flight minutes. So if you can reduce the amount of time they have to fly somewhere else to get water, your bees are going to naturally live longer. Because bee lifespan is usually based on wear and tear on the wings than it is like a chronological age.
How far away does the water need to be from your hives?
I guess they're about 10 feet away, not that far. And I usually keep it in the shade. In the winter, I move, because I move my hives into a sunny spot, and then I move the water source. And then in the summer, I move the water source in shade.
Yeah, could you explain the mechanism for the bucket thing with the fish, water mover?
This thing here?
Yeah, what are you doing with the pump?
So the lid, I just drill a hole in the center. And the fish pump sits at the bottom of the bucket, and then you use a flexible hose to attach the pump and have it long enough so it will come up the top of the bucket.
Right.
And then because there are little holes drilled into it, as the water comes out, then it just drains back into the bucket again.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a cheap way to. cheap
So-
little fountain.
A strong hive of 80,000 bees can use 3 gallons of water a day. So you need to make sure that it fills itself back up. You know, people put a little tray down there and it's gone, and you know, they don't build up for it anymore. But they can go up to 3 gallons of water a day, so that's a lot of water. They use that to cool the hive down and keep the temperatures at the right temperature, so if they don't have it and the brood can get too hot.
In a system like hers, you could also add a hose that has a float filler.
Yeah.
And then whenever it drops, it would refill itself.
If you use a swamp filler float.
Yeah.
You know, people fill up a bird bath or something and they foam a bees have water, well, it's probably not enough.
You can get a T that'll fit right on the end of your,
For 2 days.
you can get a little T that fits right on the end of a spigot, like on the side of your house. So they're getting culinary water.
You gotta put it out or-
That way it's not just a hose, it's, you know, add a small hose that will give them clean, good water.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Just a quick question, a lot of these bee supply places have a product that you put in with your feeder, it's like a probiotic kind of thing, do you recommend that, is it good? I don't know anything about it, I just seen it on all these shelves.
Yeah, so probiotic minerals are good for the bees, they help with the gut flora. See, nectar has a lot more in it than just sugar, you know, there's enzymes, or, you know, bacteria, there's, you know, probiotic basically in flowers, but as you get pollen, different things, where sugar syrup that you make is just sugar. They need more than just sugar, so it's good to have something in there to help with that. I noticed, I started feeding my bees with probiotic hive syrup, and I just do straight that now, because I noticed my bees were a lot healthier on that than they were on sugar syrup. So, and you can tell by looking at them, usually, we call it the fat bee syndrome, they should be kind of fat, and their wings are really shiny, that means they're healthy. If they start looking run down, they are, and sugar syrup, it helps, but they need more than just sugar.
You do that during the winter.
No, that's, in the winter, I don't feed them the sugar syrup because I can't get it, so during the spring and the fall, I'll feed them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so
See,
because
During the
our
time
meeting
they're
is
out,
late
you don't do-
in the month,
Yeah.
we'll send you
If they're out
information
toward the
for
end,
later in March.
you don't want to harvest sugar syrup.
All right, so this is leading into our oxalic acid sponge making workshop. It's a virtual workshop because Jerry, Walt and I made the sponges yesterday. But just a little background, Varroa destructor. So this is a scientific name. This is the genus, destructor is the species name, like Homo sapien. Homo would be the genus name, but you'll see in popular literature, you know, they just refer to it as Varroa, lowercase, or mite. So it's an ectoparasite, which means living on the outside of the organism. They infect brood, they infect adults. All the pictures that you see, you know, online, there's always, you know, like this big mite somewhere on the head. But usually they're going to be between the segments on the abdomen where the fat bodies are, because that's what they're feeding off of. So it's very difficult to be able to see a mite on your bees unless you're lucky enough to have it, you know, right between its eyes or something.
For every mite you see, there's 10 more in there something.
At least, yeah. And of course, you know, mites are a problem because they're feeding off of the fat bodies. They can vector disease, meaning they can transmit diseases to the bees. And everybody's got mites. Means people say, well, what if I have mites? Like, it's not if, it's do, and what you're going to do about it. So now is the time to start thinking about how you're going to tamp down the increase in population size of your mites as the population size of your hive increases. So again, what to look for once it's warm enough, it's more than 55 degrees. I would say if you're gonna really open up your hive like this, 65 plus on a really calm day. But if you again start seeing chewed tops, but the larvae look intact, they look plump, it's probably because they were infested with mites and the bees can sense it. I don't know if they sense it by smell, if they sense it by vibration, if they can feel them moving.
Yeah, so I was in a class at the conference last month, but they were talking about the new hygienic, some of the new hygienic things that they're finding. The bees will uncap the cells. They've learned that the mites that aren't fully formed, if come in contact with air, they die. The bees have learned that, and so they'll uncap the cell, kill the mites off, and then cap it back up.
Really, they'll be kept. Wow. All right. So another way of knowing if you've got a really bad mite infestation, if you see bees with deformed wings, it's caused by a virus, the deformed wing virus. So that indicates that you need to start treating your hive. So oxalic acid is, when I say organic here, I mean it's carbon based, not that it doesn't have pesticides. And so oxalic acid is a mild acid, and food grade glycerin are the ingredients. Long history of use without any, there's nothing in terms of indication that it's harmful for the environment. It's harmful for you if you get it on your hands and then you pick your nose, but when you get it in your eyes. But otherwise, if you're careful.
Don't breathe the fumes when you're making sponges.
And yes, and that's why we make sponges in a well ventilated area, preferably outside, absolutely. Varroa are more sensitive to acids than honeybees. And the way in which the oxalic acid actually kills the mites is it gets on their feet. And in mites, it's their feet that are attaching to the fat bodies and pulling out bodily fluids from the bee. And so their feet are kind of like our mouths, and so they're highly sensitive to acids, whereas the bees are not nearly as sensitive.
I'm hoping it's a very painful, horrible death.
And the other great thing in comparison to other miticides is there's absolutely no evidence so far, and lots of people are monitoring it, whether or not the mites are naturally being selected to be resistant to oxalic acid. And it's most likely because the way in which we are trying to inhibit the mites is physical. We're not interfering with any kind of metabolic pathway necessarily. We are just killing them off straight away. It's kind of like using bleach to get rid of viruses and bacteria. There's no way they can evolve to circumvent the effects of bleach because bleach obliterates them. And so it's the same type of thing with the acid. So it's also a benefit.
Just a quick comment, it's okay to pick your friends and you can pick your nose, but you should never pick your friend's nose.
Especially if you have oxalic acid.
Especially.
So there was a lot of people who were concerned about the rules and regs and what we can do. And that is why we're calling this a workshop. And you're just paying for the materials. Nobody's making a profit off of the making of these oxalic acid sponges. So the EPA has decided that individual beekeepers like us, we can use them in our hives. They're just not, they don't have the permission to commercialize the sale of this treatment.
Make sure if you're going to use acetic acid, if you're going to purchase your own, make sure it's 95% or 99% acetic acid.
Yeah.
Some of them, they sell it as a wood bleach and it's got other stuff in it, which is toxic to bees. So you need 99% pure acetic acid.
Yeah, and I will review that in some upcoming slides. So safety is like, this is like the most important part of making these sponges. You need to have gloves. Absolutely, it's sticky and a messy process to make them. You should be wearing goggles, you should be, all the things you did when you had chemistry in high school and college. Long pants, long sleeve shirt, closed-toed shoes. Prepare your sponges outside, do not do it in your kitchen. It will make you sick. And always be careful about doing things and be thinking about how do I do everything to avoid any type of splashing. You need to have a neutralizing solution. You're going to be using this the whole time that you're making the sponges because it's messy. And as soon as you move a sponge around, you drip the oxalic acid glycerin solution, and you're going to need that baking soda solution to neutralize it. So have that jug of neutralizing solution. And got to make sure you wash everything or just soak it in your neutralizing solution. And you can tell because as soon as you stick the acid in there, right, you see all the bubbles. And then when you don't see any more bubbles, you know everything's neutralized. Okay, so what I'm going to walk you through is how would you prepare 10 sponges for 10 double deep hives? And it's really easy to cut it back for however many hives you have. So you want to we're using Swedish sponges rather than the shop towels. You can still use the shop towels. They don't last as long. They don't hold as much of the oxalic acid. So each one of those full Swedish sponges will hold 50 grams of oxalic acid glycerin concentration. And that, according to Randy Oliver's research, is walking the line between too much and damaging your queen or damaging developing brood and killing the mites. This is 50 grams per Swedish sponge is the appropriate dose. You want oxalic acid, at least 99%. Usually the good stuff is going to be 99.6, 99.7, 99.9. That's the highest. You can never get 100% because of some impurities. You want vegetable glycerin. You're going to need tongs that are dedicated, unless you don't care that your tongs get tarnished. In this process, you'll need a stainless steel pot that's not one of your pretty pots because it's going to take the finish off. You need some type of stove outside in a well-ventilated area. Thermometer, scale, something to stir everything with. Container for weighing the glycerin and something else for weighing out the oxalic acid powder. Something to write with, and then something to store your finished sponges in. And you need to be able to seal it so the moisture stays. And then again, your neutralizing solution, your baking soda solution, it's a bowl or a pot and a washcloth to be able to clean up spills and to dunk your gloved hands into it. Once you start making it, you'll see how messy they are.
Nicole, does it matter what kind of vegetable glycerin to use? There's like soy and various kinds.
It's not vegetable oil, it's glycerin.
Right.
But I didn't know if there's palm and vegetable. Yeah, I don't think so. Anybody have a type of glycerin? It's just vegetable glycerin or
It's
food grade
soy.
glycerin.
It's a soy product.
So it's, yeah,
I like different kinds of.
I don't think it matters.
Doesn't matter.
I don't think so. Okay, so this is what we did yesterday. So again, this is for 10 double deep hives. So you take your 10 sponges and we cut them in half. And so therefore you have 2 smaller pads. Make sure you have your safety glasses, waterproof gloves, and your baking soda solution. And if you're doing it for 10 sponges, that would be 500 grams of oxalic acid dihydrate. And then you're going to add your powder, and then you should add your liquid first. That avoids splashing the acid. There's nothing to splash because you're pouring in the liquid second. And it's in a 1-to-1 ratio, 500 grams. Weighing is absolutely critical. Don't eyeball it because if you make your solution too concentrated, you're going to damage your bees. So you've got your oxalic acid, you're gonna add the glycerin second to avoid splashing of the solution. And when you stir it up, it's going to, it's white, it's thick, and viscous. You're gonna heat it over low to medium low heat, not to exceed 160 degrees. And it takes time. So depending on the volume, you know, it can take a half an hour for your solution to heat up. You want to heat it up slowly. You want to stir it very slowly, again, to make sure you're not splashing. And once you've reached temperature, I mean, you'll check it. You know, it's around 160, and suddenly all the crystals have been surrounded by water molecules, and so the whole thing looks clear. It'll still have like a kind of a yellow tinge, but it won't have that. It won't look like a white paste anymore. And that's when you remove it from the heat. And then this is the messy part. So while everything is still hot, you want to add your sponges to the solution. And you need to do this before the solution cools and crystallizes. So you're going to need tongs. Here we have 2 different buckets, each with the oxalic acid solution, and Jerry and Walter dipping them, the sponges, letting them absorb the solution, and then we're putting them in a bin. And then what I was doing is I was taking the sponges and putting them into labeled Ziploc bags for everybody.
And we pretend like we've got goggles on.
Well, Jerry does have goggles.
He's gonna safety goggles.
Oh, for the,
They were real goggles.
yeah,
They just,
they were real, she gave me to me, they were real. She says, quick,
They were
quick, we're gonna take pictures, guys.
So you're dipping each individual sponge in the solution?
Wait,
it's actually
put
like
three
4 at a time.
3 or 4 at a time.
I just stick my sponges in a red tin and pour the solution over.
Or you can pour it
When
over.
they're saturated, then I pick them up with the tongs and stick them straight in the bag.
If you're doing
We were
2
doing
versus
over
doing
200
400, is the
sponges.
thing.
No, I usually do 30 or 40 at a
Yeah.
time.
We were separating to put in bags, but count.
Well, I
and-
just stick them all
Yeah.
in the same bag, and then when you get to the hive, you just use the tongs.
Yeah, but we were making,
We were
filling orders.
Selling them, or not selling, but filling
So-
orders.
I would recommend, watch these guys over top of that pan with no ventilator on.
Yeah.
And you don't think it's hurting you, but it hurts.
It does.
You start- And the worst part is that it destroys your liver, so. It's not just your lungs that you're getting, it gets in your system, and it can be really bad for your liver, so you don't wanna have liver failure, so be careful, cause it's nasty stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do it on your back porch.
Vaporization.
Well, yeah, it's better to get a chemical with cartridges, those ones with vapors, just basically, it's not the best.
I'm sorry?
I fried my lung once, so I.
Really?
Careful.
All right, well, there you go. We need to convince you. And then you don't want to make the sponges and then a couple hours later on your hives. So you want to at least give them like 24 hours to solidify. You'll see that there's going to be crystals. If you if you bought some sponges, it will crystallize, and that is fine. And then when you put it in the hive, oftentimes the humidity in the hive will sort of melt some of the crystals back down because it's warmer and you're applying more moisture, which is also fine. And then if you have any questions, if you want more information on each of these slides, I've provided the citation, which is Scientific Beekeeping, Randy Oliver's website. Storage. So some people, it depends on the brand and of your Swedish sponges for how long they're gonna last. Some of them will break down within, a couple of months. I've got some that are at least 6.5 months old now, and the sponges I like are If You Care. They hold up really well. The matrix holds together well, even while it's being degraded by the acid. But even if they start to crumble a little bit, you can still put them in there. Because what you want is, you want the bees to be walking all over them. And so sometimes the being a little bit more friable is actually a good thing. So again, when you apply these, right, you're gonna have to crack open your hive. So it's gotta be a really warm day. And you wanna Make sure that your bees are not still in a tight cluster. If they appear to be tightly clustered, put off doing your treatment for another warm day. You want to wear gloves. If you wear your beekeeping gloves, you're gonna get a hole. Or you're gonna want to have tongs, and you need your neutralizing solution with you so you can clean everything. It's clear, right? You can't see when you've got the acid on your gloves or your tools, and then it's easily spread around. So you want to add 2 of those sponges that we have. We cut them in half, so you need a full sponge for a double D. And you want to place it where the bees are going to be able to access it. You want them walking on the bottom and the top. You want to avoid putting your sponges near a food source, because that was part of the problem with the drip. So initially the suggestion was to put oxalic acid into a sugar solution and then drip it between the seams, and the bees were eating it. And that's when you were seeing the die-off. So if they eat the acid, it's going to have a negative impact. So you want to make sure it's away from your food sources. And you should have them on the hive for about 60 to 75 days. If you use the shop towels, probably won't last that long because they'll drag it through the hive and dump it out the front door.
They actually found little blue flakes in honey from the shop nuts.
Oh,
So that's one of the reasons why they don't want people to use it, because they break it down into little pieces and then it gets into the food source.
Is this, do you keep this stuff in there over the summer?
Yes.
part of integrated pest management. So you use oxalic acid. You could do things like removing drone brood, because drone brood are larger, and so there are more mites per cell on average than per worker. So using a variety of techniques in addition to a variety of chemical approaches to keep the mite population down.
You need to have one box between the towels and your honey.
Yes.
So if you do 2 brood boxes, you put it on top of the bottom brood box. And then.
Yeah.
And they should be okay.
Is this better than vapor?
Yes. So the efficacy or how well it works is I think it's almost 20% better in terms of mite kill than vapor.
So are you supposed to do the vapor through the summer as well, periodically?
No, suggestion now is vapor is not as effective, because what the crystals do is you heat it and it goes from a solid to a gas, right? So and as soon as it gets into the hive, the temperature is lower than the little pan that you're heating it on. And so it just recrystallizes. And so the efficacy or how well the acid works once it's in a hard crystallized form rather than sort of in a gooey glycerin system, it doesn't work as well. Yes, so all the batteries and wands that people have purchased are not as.
Well, and if you go to Randy's website, he's got some data in there that shows that unless you do it every other day, it's really ineffective.
Right, so the suggestion was like every 4 days or so many weeks.
Every other day, a vaporizing, the vaporizer.
Because you have every day, yes.
His data showed that if you didn't do it that frequently, you really weren't getting ahead of your mites at all.
Your bees are still hatching out every day. Well, they should be.
The mites are under a capping, capping slow blocks the oxalate.
Right.
I really like these sponges. I've used them for 2 years now. I mean, this is my go-to thing.
So you put them in the fall and then just.
I just
Not over winter. That would interfere with cluster formation. So spring and summer.
There's
For
only
those that ordered them, we gave you 2 sets. If you go for one hive, we gave you 4 halves.
Yes, because this.
So put one in and then as they're worn out, and they say the way to test it is to touch it with your finger and take the shower. That's a cheaper.
Tell people that, tell people.
And then we're then after the next.
Disclaimer, disclaimer.
I've never used them.
And
All right,
why
so-
did I say they're not used during a honey
Now,
flow?
well,
There's one that is not.
I understand.
Right, you can use it in place.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
I-
So.
That's what
I had a quick question, if I
Yes,
may.
please.
You guys, you mentioned that if the bees uncap a cell, that the mites will die because they're exposed to air. Would there be any benefit to finding a way, this would be new, but it benefit to opening the drone, and you got a whole frame of drone? Just get rid of the cappings and then put it back in? Would
That's
that?
a great experiment.
Well,
Let me
That-
know how it works.
I don't have bees.
so they are experimenting with different things like that, but you gotta be careful, you don't wanna just go open it yourself, because then you release, some mites might be mature enough. to do that, Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
better just to freeze that drone
Yeah.
cell and kill them off that way.
I'm not saying put it back in necessarily right away, give them time to be exposed
Yeah,
to
so
the air.
the mites have to have the bees to survive. So there's a ferrotic phase and then the. So they live on the bees for 11 to 14 days. The rest of the time they're in the cells. 90% of the mites are in the cells. And so. But they've noticed that there's new behavior, the bees are uncapped and kind of killing them off. But you as a beekeeper aren't gonna know, are the mites immature in there or not, but bees can figure it out somehow, but if you're going in and just opening everything, put it right back in, but if you just take it out and just let them die, it's gonna kill them too. They say freeze it because it's quicker, but if you just let the drones die, the mites are gonna die with it. And so,
I just wondered if there's a way to keep your drone population with, just uncap the drones.
unless you're raising queens, you don't really need a drone population.
Yeah. True.
They'll make enough problems even.
Deadbeat deads.
Just a thought.
They're deadbeat deads.
So one word
Drones.
caution in terms of safety, when you remove the sponges from your hives, they're still sitting. So they may feel dry or maybe they still feel wet, but regardless.
Don't touch it.
Yeah. Either use gloves or they'll in through your leather gloves or use tongs to remove them. You can compost them. I've been composting mine. Doesn't seem to affect my plants at all, or you throw them in the garbage. But make sure you have your little jug of neutralizing solution, because you'll be amazed at where you find this acid. It'll be on your glasses, it'll be on your pen, it'll be on your keys. All right, so Julie is not here, but she wanted me to give you some information and she's got a whole bunch. So I'm just gonna whiz through these since it's after 8. But for those of you who want to be on the swarm catching list, and it's super fun to catch swarms. Last year was my first year. But she's got statistics from 2020 because that was our last good swarm year. 225 swarms and 30 cutouts. So the calls began mid-April, this week, last week of April, first 2 weeks of May. So who do you call? You call Julie. Call her or text her. If you see a swarm or you're handing out information to people, maybe people have swarms come into their yard. Make sure that you have the address, the location of the swarm, how high, how big, how long they've been there. If you're going to, having photos is preferred. You need to text the photos to this number and not to the call number. If you want to catch swarms, you have to be a paid member. You have to fill out the form. All right, and then you'll be called based upon if you've already caught a swarm or not, and the location, your relative proximity to wherever that swarm is. And what kind of skills you have. Are you willing to climb a ladder? Do you have, a bucket thing to get swarms high out, or are you someone who's good at cutting out? And then Julie said that if you want to swarm on a particular day, to let her know that you've got the day off and if there's a swarm, you're available, so that's rather kind. All right, so what do you do when you get your call? You're going to call the homeowner or whomever has made the call in. Let them know when you'll arrive or roughly. Remind them not to spray. 2 of the swarms I went to get last spring, they'd already sprayed them. And so then they just wanted me to remove bees outside farm. And then if it's in a more public space, see if they can just put some chairs around it. Any kind of obstacle to keep people away with a sign saying beekeeper on the way, you know, stay away, do not spray. And people get super excited. They have tons and tons of questions. So if you have the time, you know, interact with whomever is there and try to educate them about the fact that bees are not as frightening as most people think they are. Oh, and do not cut anything. This should be obvious, but some people get caught up and they're worried that this beautiful swarm will take off, but don't trim anyone's landscaping before asking them. We do not insure you, so you take full responsibility for your safety. So please make sure that you're up to the task. You have the balance that's necessary if you're going to be climbing ladders. You have that equipment with you.
It's not worth getting hurt over.
And then we would prefer it if you make 2 trips out, right? First trip is you go assess, you try to, and you start coaxing everybody into whatever it is you're going to use to catch the swarm, and then go back so you don't leave any of the foragers behind. As Julie said, she will absolutely call you and make you go back out. And she suggests that you keep, if you're really into it, that you keep your gear ready so that most people don't want to wait too long. And we're hoping to keep the response time down to 20 minutes. Okay, and then I think you guys will like this. What?
Their sewer is backed up.
What you can't hear is Julie speaking. That was 7 floors up. And it's dripping down into the parking lot. And so Julie went out with 2 other people to try to, they figured that this was going to be a cutout, but they could actually never find where the bees were. So they think that something had, either it got too hot and the bees died, or because obviously the wax is melting.
Yeah.
And all the honey is dripping out. And she never heard whether or not the people who own the building, it's a commercial building, actually, you know, were able to excavate it, but nobody got on a swarm. And they did get a bucket of honey, but
Bit of sand in.
yeah.
The flow high.
Yeah. Okay, so one more thing about your sponges. You've got twice the amount that you ordered.
That is good service.
Okay, so if you ordered 6 sponges, right, 6 full sponges, that would be 12 halves or 12 pads. And so you've got twice that amount so that you can use the second set for a later treatment.
Thank you.
And if you encounter problems or you have questions about what to do with your sponges, Facebook, you can post questions there, you can email us. I don't know how many people check our email, I know I do, but if you can email me, I'll find someone to send you email to if I can.
When do you suggest to start for 60 to 75 days?
Thank you. You're welcome. I suggest when it's at least 65 degrees or warmer, because you're gonna have to disrupt that cluster. So you want the bees not to be in a tight cluster anymore.
Probably a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and you want like a couple of days, like not a snowstorm the next day. Yeah. But as soon as you can, and so, you know, hopefully later in March, there'll be a series of, you know, warm days where it would be a good time to do that. All right, well, thank you. And then
We have an order for Ron.
Yeah.
Here, okay, we've got that up.
Okay, we'll stop the recording.